Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review the original Resident Evil movie. This is the first time that I've ever watched this movie from start to finish. I would always come in on this movie at like a tail end or bits and pieces of it. I never really fully fledgedly watched the complete movie until now. And really, when going into here, I have also seen quite a bit of some of the sequels as well. So I'm like, this first movie doesn't actually sit all that well for me, but I think the sequels that end up coming up later end up like really representing the Resident Evil world a little bit more, or kind of better, is a much more interesting and or a better representation of the Resident Evil world than maybe this one does. While honestly watching this movie came down as a severely generic horror movie that I think just somebody wanted to do it to fill up their portfolio. This movie to me kind of seemed also like a tax write off. I don't know, to me, this movie just was not, uh, it was just not fascinating enough for me. We have it to where it seems too generic. Like, if you go in and watch the Dwayne The Rock Johnson movie Doom, and then you watch this, you would basically say that that movie and this movie are almost like one and the same, but I think there is even more things going on with that Doom movie because several years later than this film. We have it to where there really is very minimal special effects, and the special effects that they actually do kind of rough. Especially once we get to the dog parts in this movie, I was just like, oh my god, this looks awful. I feel horrible for the dogs that had to do this movie and had to wear that makeup and look the way they did. And I was just like, man, I feel so bad for these dogs. They look like garbage, sadly enough. Uh, um, Going into this film, I really I really thought that this movie is way too simple for the most point. This movie overall is just okay, these people go into this facility and the facility is going to kill them. Why not just leave the facility and never go back? Shouldn't that have been easy enough to just yeah, this is definitely not going to work out. Well, I'm deucing. I'm peacing out. I'm getting out of here. But no, people were just stubbornly no, we have to complete our mission. No, we have to do this, even though it doesn't make sense. Okay. Uh, we ended up having characters in this movie that I think, the character Rain, which is played by Michelle Rodriguez, who, she sticks out in every one of her movies. She can't help it. It's just, she is that way. She's just, the way she looks, the way she acts, everything about her sticks out. And so, really, in this movie, we end up having, Rain, I think, sticking out, and a lot of the other characters are just kind of just plain. Everything about almost everyone in this movie is so bland and or plain that I'm like, why should I care about any of these people? What, like in the writing scheme of things, what really has it to where like, oh man, I can't wait till I see Alice just having to say absolutely jack crap nothing, to where this military SWAT team that comes in ends up just having all the lines, and we have also this like quasi detective Matt guy that he is just there to try to unlock his handcuffs for an entire movie. Like that's basically it. And then we we end up having we end up having it to where the most baffling and or confusing thing is we have a we have a military force that realizes that there could quite possibly be this thing called a zombie infection going on, and they end up retrieving Alice in this movie. And immediately, when looking at Alice from neck down, all she's wearing is a dress. Anybody confused about the skimpiest and trimpiest dress, and she's just gonna fight out a zombie outbreak in the skimpiest looking dress, and then they eventually just decide, oh well, hey, like we should just throw a coat over her, so that way that will help her fight off the zombies even more. Yes. Does that boggle anyone's mind to just be like, wait a minute, so you're gonna go out and fight a zombie infection with next to nothing on, so any zombie can go ahead and just nibble at your arm, so you can eventually be infected. This makes no sense. And then, very at the tail end of the movie, where we have it to where Alice is making her like last stand again, I ask people, what is she wearing? You would think like the best zombie movie that I've ever seen in my life had a group of people that were all going around, and they were all wearing like head to toe sports gear. Like they were wearing like catcher's mitts and uh, like hockey pads and like football helmets and all kinds of things, and like that was actually the smartest way to go and fight a zombie infection, and be able to not actually get infected. We had it to where Brad Pitt duct taped newspapers to his arms and fought off zombies via that way. We had it to where like Train to Busan, we had some guy who was like duct taping stuff to his arms and fighting off these guys, and I was like, man, that is like the smartest maneuver I've ever seen in my life, and it is the cheapest thing that that guy could have honestly done. And we have Alice, who is just head to toe, just in the skimpiest looking dress possible, and a leather jacket, and she's gonna go and just not get bitten, not get infected, whatever. Like, I don't care if Alice, who is what she is, where she becomes this, like, super magnum cum laude karate expert, whatever person, eventually, I think, where she can just out kill anything. Like, that doesn't matter to me. I'm just in brain noggin this movie bottlenecking itself, or just encompassed in this thing. I I just don't quite get or understand that. Like you would have thought that she would have just strolled around until she could find the right thing to wear, and so on and so forth. That's bugged the crap out of me for I don't know how long. And I think a lot of people when they eventually find out that that they have a zombie outbreak in their environment, they wear the dumbest clothes. It's like, oh yeah, I'll just put on a jacket and I think I'll be fine. No, I'm gonna put on 12 different layers, and like I'm gonna go and get an axe or a knife or a something, if I don't have a gun in my home, to like one have like some kind of weighted weapon like a bat or something, and kick and annihilate people while I try to make my way. Like nobody's ever thought of this. Nobody's ever thought of this. What idiots. But anyways, let's go on to spoilers, because that's all I can talk about within this movie, because there isn't much really going on. Because we have it to where like there's these bizarrish goals that don't make sense to me, and then we kind of have people that are kind of pushed back into this other room just so that way they can possibly either one get infected, or two run off to realize that, man, these zombies are they're really kicking up. Really? I didn't think they would. When you're in a facility that seems quiet, yeah, that's because there's a whole reason for that. You have a tour, like a facility that has a AI is probably just gonna go like, oh yeah, well I'm just gonna go and have one room that is just gonna have all the zombies in one room, so that way when stupid people end up unlocking a door, like, oh hey, here's 30 zombies in one room, sucks to be you. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So we end up having it to where in the very beginning of this movie, we have Alice who is in a shower, displayed in all her glory, but we can't quite see anything, which is so disappointing, right? Because we basically see her in a dress that basically shows off almost everything, as well as there eventually being a coat in her future. Doesn't make sense to me, but it is what it is. So we end up having Alice who doesn't know who she is, and then goes into a room to find out that she has a dresser that she pulls a drawer out of, and there seems to be a gun there with a combination. And Alice is just like, oh my god, who am I? Like, what am I? Where am I? And so we end up having also that Alice strolls along into this home to eventually find some guy named Spence, but then also a detective named Matt, who is supposedly a detective. We're not exactly sure. We end up having Matt mentioned to the quote unquote police force, because I don't know what they are. Like, I don't know who they are. I don't know what their title is, because I didn't really care, to be brutally honest. Like, once we get past sequels, I'm like, oh, those are who they are, because for this movie, there's a huge disconnect with whatever's going on in this movie to me. When we go into sequels, I think I will have much more of a connection with the movies, because I think they'll just be better. Or what is the Resident Evil exception of being a better film? Because really, they just get really weird and odd at some points and some junctures. So, going into here, we have this SWAT force that ends up coming in and saying, like, Alice, you're one of us. You're an agent. And so we end up having it to where the detectives end up scanning Alice, and ends up scanning Alice, and it seems that she has amnesia. It seems that also this character named Spence had amnesia, but Matt knows full well who he is. I'm like, okay, what? How is it that Matt knows who he is, but Alice doesn't know who she is? I am so confused. So moving on, I guess. I guess this uh this virus thing going on affects people in different ways. Maybe not everybody gets to be zombie-itis person, whatever. Maybe some people just bizarrely get amnesia. So we end up having it to where this SWAT team is on a mission to go to the Umbrella Corporation to go and knock out the security. And speaking of Umbrella Corporation, so now we have to show the generic montage of horror things going on in this Umbrella Corporation. So we have it to where there is a scientist who has to have like a hazmat suit layered in all kinds of things. And so we end up having this guy who is like in this machine this is like the most bio weaponry weapon that he could have ever came up with in his life, I guess, in this Umbrella Corporation thing. Whereas somebody, I guess, sneezes on this virus thing, it could kill millions. So we end up having this guy put this bioweaponry into this suitcase and just send it off. So we end up seemingly have it to where the guy with the suitcase ends up deciding to take this bioweapon, whatever, this virus thing, and he ends up letting it loose onto this Umbrella corporation and then just tries to skedaddle as quickly as possible. So while this is going on, we have the AI just going like, well, I think everyone's going to just turn into zombies here. So more than likely, it'll probably just be best to kill them off anyways. We have in one part of one of these rooms that it seems that there is a sprinkler system that's going off, but there's no fire. We have one woman that's screaming at the camera to the AI that it's like, "There's no fire here, you moron!" And so we end up having one guy who is grabbing an axe that is trying to axe his way through this thick mirror or thick window. I mean, because mirrors and windows are the same thing, right? So we end up having him axing his way through this window, and it barely just chips a little thing out. So we are assessing that these people are just going to frickin' just drown in this area, and surefire enough, we eventually see later that they just drowned. So we also end up seeing people go into an elevator, and they find out that they are just going to just have their elevator just crash and fall and whatever, because I guess the AI is just like, dude, I'm just going to kill everybody. So we have a wild ride of people in an elevator that are going to fall. One elevator does stop, and one woman tries to get out of the elevator, pulls it apart, and then tries to get her way out of it, but she ends up dead as well. She ends up just chopping her body in half, or her head falls off, or she ends up killing herself somehow, probably loses her head. And I was just like, man, that has got to be the worst possible way to, one, die, but that has got to be the most, horrifying thing. That's why I would be afraid of elevators, because, to me, I would be like, well, if this elevator is to ever malfunction or whatever, you're basically effed. And I would never really want to, that's the worst way to go. It's either you're going to get dropped, or it's either you're going to try to get your way out of the elevator because you'd be strong enough to open up the doors, but then heaven forbid, you probably go and oh well, hey, I can get out, and then you're broken in half, legitimately, and so on and so forth. Plus, this AI is just like, dude, I got to kill everybody. I don't know why, but I just got to do it because everybody's going to eventually get infected, and we have it to where this AI is trying to like basically contain this infection to where if she assumes that anyone is to get infected, it's like, well, I gotta kill everybody off and I gotta contain this thing because I don't want this getting anywhere further out than the umbrella corporation, which I'm assuming is gonna happen regardless. So going on into here, we end up just having like this huge montage of just people dying and so on and so forth. Boo hoo for them. We eventually find out that one of the people that are with Alice had put together this whole virus thing to be in the Umbrella Corporation. And we're also starting to see that Alice is starting to get memories back of her previous life or whatever life that she had led, to where I'm just like, okay, so whatever she's kind of remembering is only to help with the story. Like, it's not like she's gonna remember her like 8th birthday and be like, oh wow, that was fun. Like, no, everything that she has to remember coincidentally has to help her with this story, and so on and so forth. So we end up finding out that Alice was a person that was seemingly going to sell someone this virus. It seems that we have it to where Alice was talking to Matt's sister, because we'll end up finding Matt's sister somewhere in the Umbrella Corporation sometime later, which we'll talk about. So, making our way to the Umbrella Corporation. So, we have the SWAT team and whoever all going in, and they're all just going to make their way into this Umbrella Corporation. It seems that Kaplan had said, "Oh yeah, like the Red Queen's defenses are down." Supposedly, the Red Queen is some kind of AI that this place is built. Like, it's kind of like Skynet in the Terminator Genesis movie, where we have it to where like we have this like hologram like presence that is basically going to say like, well, hey, I'm the villain of this story, but I have to come at you as a child, so I can't like it'll seem more creepy that way. I don't think it really matters. Yeah, it'll be more creepy if it's a child that talks to you and tells you you're going to die. I don't think it really matters. I didn't find this hologramish like thing a thing I could care about at all. I thought it was really interesting that we had this presence in the movie. I think that's the most interesting thing about this movie is just the hologramic presence, just because it kind of made this movie kind of less generic, but like that's like saying like that's like a 5% difference thing out of 95% generic. Sadly enough, it's brutally honest. We have to make it to where like it is severely inconvenient for anyone to get a gun in this movie. Like, we have it to where reasonably, like, the only way people get a gun is because they have to go and legitimately, like, there's a reason why people have guns in this movie. It's like, oh yeah, like, I'm gonna get a gun now, but then I'm gonna get attacked by dogs? Oh, what a coinky dink. Like, it's like, for the person that doesn't have the gun in the movie, they get it at the coincidentally perfect time to go and fight off this one thing. I'm like, so like the SWAT team just hand out everybody guns because they don't trust them, but also it's just like, well, I'm not just going to give anybody a gun, even though they really should need it because there's a bajillion zombies all coming at them. And we end up having it to where Matt at some point is shuffling with his keys and so on and so forth. But we'll get to that. So, first off, we end up having Kaplan saying, oh, okay, well, hey, the defenses are down. How about we stroll down this long hallway that is going to get us further on uh, into this umbrella uh, corporation thing. And so we end up having supposedly the medic, and a couple other commandos. One is kind of like the tall superior of everyone. And so we just have those commandos go on into this long hallway, which we end up finding out is some kind of trap of sorts. The defenses go back on, and then all of a sudden we end up finding out that also that door has closed. And so not everyone has gone through this hallway that ends up having some laser thing that ends up cutting people up like a son of a. I'm like, man, this kind of reminds me of the movie like Cube, where eventually there's like some cube things that they like go from cube to cube into, where some of them are a trap or some of them are just like, yeah, you're gonna die. So we end up having it to where this is booby trapped, and we end up having it to where like one laser seems to go off and ends up chopping someone on the head. So like the medic ends up dying right away, and her head just like falls off her like neck, and she just, yeah, instant death. We eventually have one guy who loses his fingers, and we have it to where the commander's like, you're going into shock. Like, you're going into shock because you lost your fingers. Oh my god. And then so we end up having the two commandos who can seem to function. We end up having it to where, like, interestingly enough, we have two of the commandos who end up like jumping up onto this little rung that they can hold on to. One guy ends up jumping up, and the laser line ends up jumping up as well and chopping this guy in half. And we end up having the one guy that's left, that's named One, like he ends up like sticking onto the wall there, to where he completely dodges this laser line entirely, to where eventually once he drops down, there is yet another laser thing that is going to come up, and he's like, well, okay, like let's see what's going to happen now, to where this laser ends up just kind of just making it so that he's definitely going to freaking get hit by this, and he's like, oh crap, and then he just gets sliced and diced and sliced, and so you just see him like standing there, and then he just like his pieces just start falling off on him, to where eventually we just see Alice just watching everyone die, and it's like, well, oh well. So we end up having it to where every single SWAT person dies, and so, but Kaplan had supposedly turned off the defenses, and he said, like, okay, we can go now, because I think the room is safe. And we have it to where Spencer and Alice are looking at him like, are you crazy? Like, there is no way I'm going to go in there now. Like, you already said before the defenses were off. It's like, no. Like, deja vu much? And so we end up having Kaplan, like, grabbing this, like, bag of stuff that this SWAT team had. And then they were going to backtrack onto, like, where the former, where all the other, where like, Matt and Rain and I think JD all were. And so it seems that eventually when they were to take down the defenses, that also unlocked a bunch of stuff to all come on out. So we have it to where Alice and Spencer and Kaplan make their way back to JD, Rain, and Matt, who are all just kind of hiding in the back. And we end up having one zombie woman going and like seemingly grabbing onto Rain, nibbling a. She gets a little nibble of Rain's hand, and I'm like immediately I'm like, here's my thing. We have these SWAT people. I'm assessing, and so we have it to where JD is telling this woman, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna give you the count of 85 billion. Like, please don't attack us. Just walk away." Like, one, two, three, 175. And this zombie girl is continually coming at them, and we have it to where JD is just popping her in the leg repetitiously. And I'm like, dude, if you're a SWAT person, it's always head or it's always heart. And he was just trying to avoid killing this woman, and you could tell that this woman is completely unresponsive. It's not like she was saying like, "Oh, please don't hurt me, Mr. JD person. Please, I would just rather you not." Like, no. She was completely just dead. Like, and so we had it to where JD was repetitiously like popping her in the legs, to where Rain just goes in and just lights her up with bullets. And I'm just like, God, these people are just stupid. I'm like, dude, just one gun, one bullet, one to the head. Like, if you have a small gun, like, go for the head, especially it's just one zombie. Make sure they're dead. Don't just fire off a bajillion rounds, because it's wasting bullets on one zombie. To where eventually, yeah, they realize how stupid that is, because eventually when Alice and Spencer and Kaplan or whoever all make their way back, they realize that, oh my god, there's a ton of zombies all around here. And so now we have to all just scramble. We end up having Matt realize that there are keys for him to get his hands uncuffed. So he has to do that for like an hour of this movie. And so, because we have Matt who can't see like what exactly he's doing, to eventually then he drops the keys and then has to go after the keys, and then there's a zombie that is crawling after him, and Matt eventually ends up dropping the keys in some sewer-esh like thing, and then Matt has to go into the sewer with his fingers and try to be able to get the key, and like this is going on for like 12 years where Matt is desperately trying to get these keys and then eventually unlocking them. Like, shouldn't have Matt just said, like, hey, because this zombie outbreak is going on, how about you free me from these handcuffs, everyone else? Like, I will not, like, I will help you guys out. But how about you give me a little bit of unlocking those keys? How about you? Like, how about you give me a little help? You know? Give me a gun, like, I'll help you. But no, like, we have Matt who's taking 12 years to unlock his handcuffs. So, hey, like, try to uncuff yourself with keys. It's not that easy. Ba 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 ba. So, moving on. So, we end up having it to where we end up having people realize that they're basically effed. The longer that they stay there, the longer that they realize there are just more and more zombies coming in. Eventually, JD ends up opening this room that ends up having a swarm of zombies, to where JD ends up getting consumed by this zombie people. Rain is like, no, not JD, the one person that I fought a zombie with, and he could barely kill any of the zombie because he was trying to shoot it in the legs, and oh my god, that sucks. So, really just had to build that moment up there for Rain to just be like, no, and JD be like, yeah, I'm gonna die. So, we end up having these people scrambling to go anywhere else but where they are actually at, because they're realizing that they are just going to get onslaughted. And so we end up having these characters rush into another wing of this place, to eventually have them realize the reason why all these zombies just came out to play is because when they took out the defenses, like, that just unleashed everything. because we had them like strolling out before to make their way into the Umbrella Corporation to just see that there were some uh, rooms here and there that had people like floating around in it, uh, because reasonably, like they had flooded the compartments so that way people would just drown, and they drowned it to just become zombies. So, moving on. So, the mission was to basically uh, have them try and uh, like basically just shut up the Red Queen, just shut her out, to try and control this facility, and to try and uh, shut this Red Queen down. So we end up having Alice and Kaplan, who are to uh, put these pieces together, this Rubik's Cubish pieces thing together, to go on and have the Red Queen hologram saying like, "Oh no, don't do this, stop! Like I bequeath you," and so we have it to where Kaplan is like, bequeath all you want, do whatever you want, like you're not gonna like, there's nothing you could say, there's nothing you're gonna do that's going to stop me, and we eventually have it to where the little girl is like, "You're gonna die down here," and it's just like, meh, whatever. So pushing on, so we end up going along here, and we end up having the group trying to now get out of this facility because their mission is basically done. And so we end up making our way in the world today. So Matt ends up going to his sister's desk, and while he's going to his sister's desk, he ends up getting attacked by his sister. And so while that is going on, we end up having eventually Alice scrambling to get some cube of some sorts to smack Matt's sister to kill her. And so we end up finding out that Matt is like, well, hey, like, I guess since you saved my life, I'm going to tell you who I am now, because it doesn't really matter anyways. So we have it to where Matt says, hey, like, I am under a regime of sorts that was going to try to prevent this virus from getting out, and he is, I guess, some like undercover person that was saying he was a cop, but he was not a cop. He was actually just part of this guerrilla group that was trying to stop the Umbrella Corporation. And so Matt starts talking about a woman that was supposed to help them in their task, and that was actually supposed to be Alice. And Alice says, "Oh yeah, like I worked with your sister before, and I was the person that like I was talking to her before about helping you guys out, and so that's me." Ha 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 ha. So we eventually go on to have one. Alice eventually goes into this one wing of things where she is to eventually just get attacked by a ton of dogs. And because we end up just seeing this room where there's just a bunch of like small cages that had gotten chewed through, which immediately I'm like, oh, okay, well, that means that dogs got free. And so we end up having it to where eventually Alice coincidentally gets a gun right at the perfect time to have herself be the perfect marksman, to where she ends up shooting all these dogs and killing them all, sadly enough, but they're all uh, bizarrely zombie-fied, radioactive, whatever dogs. And so Eventually, we also find out that the queen had unleashed these, uh, like, these virus slash living tissue amalgamation monsterish things, to where eventually her master plan was, if the Red Queen could not win, then eventually these monstrous things would go and kill uh, the whoever the men and women were left, so that way the Red Queen could get what she wanted. So we end up having it to where Alice, Matt, and everybody just reconvene with one another, and so we end up having Alice consistently remembering who Spence is, and eventually she ends up like calling him by name and all kinds of things. And it seems that she and him had some kind of relationship with one another. And it seems that Spence was saying that he had forgotten everything, but I think he really and truly lied. So we end up having it to where Spence comes to the truth, because reasonably, we are just kind of like a door away from either one, death, or we are also just a door away from people escaping. And so we end up having it uh, to where the Red Queen is to come back online, uh, to try and help out this group of people, because like we have it to where the group ends up trying to like make their way into uh, these little like this little like systems and sewer systems and stuff like that, to eventually be caught by a ton of zombies. Eventually, they try to make their way through this pipe thing, to crawl like on top of like these environments, and eventually the pipe ends up busting and breaking, to where eventually uh, Kaplan is to be assumed that he is going to be dead, but eventually we end up finding out that Kaplan ended up like taking the long way around and saving people at the end of all of this. Uh, Anyways, moving on as much as humanly possible. So we have the group all ending up into this one room that is going to give them the freedom that they need to go back to uh, this like train that was going to get them out of here. And so we end up having it to where supposedly the Red Queen is not going to let them out of this room because there is one person that is infected. So it's like, well, I'm going to try to bottleneck this infection as much as humanly possible. And so Rain, hey, like, you know what? You're going to need to die, because you're infected. And so we end up having it to where Rain is like, well, okay, just kill me off because I'm going to get infected anyways. And we have it to where Spencer acknowledges, like, well, hey, you know what? Like, the antivirus is just right onto that train. Like, I had left it there. I'm like, shouldn't you have just been holding on to that just in case you did get infected? Like, isn't that the dumbest thing that you could have humanly possibly done? Just be like, oh yeah, like I just have vials upon vials of the antivirus, but you know what? I'm just gonna not keep it on me just in case I get infected. Like, oh well, like if I like if I just get infected, I guess I have to just run on my way all the way back to this train thing and hope that I can get out there to give myself an injection, and I'll be fine. We end up also finding out that Spence was the person that started this whole virus thing going on in the Umbrella Corporation. I honestly want to keep saying, I honestly want to say Umbrella Academy, but that's not what it is. I honestly think that it would have been better if it would have called Umbrella Academy, but it is what it is. So we end up also finding that that Spence was kind of using Alice, and eventually, once Spence really finds out who Alice really is, it's just like, well, it was nice, you and I, but like, dude, I don't even care about anything anymore. Like, dude, I'm up for my own survival, and I don't care about anything else. So we have it to where Spence goes out onto the train, and he goes and gives himself the antivirus. And so we're having Alice and and Matt and Rain all waiting into this room to see what they're going to do with Rain. All while that's going on, we have the uh, the monstrous thing that Red Queen unlocked. Uh, she sent that out to go and kill Spence, and then eventually we have it to where this monster is breaking through this window to make its way to Alice, Matt, and Rain. And so we end up having it to where they're having to make a consensus on killing Rain and whatever. And so we end up having we have this like yelling, everyone's yelling of like do it. Everybody's like yelling at the same time like and whatever, everybody like do it. So Rain is like displaying herself bizarrely to just say like hit me, like kill me, do it now. He's like she's like Terminator Predator right now. She's like, do it. So we have it to where, and plus the AI is saying, do it. And so we end up having Alice going and taking this axe and uh, chucking it into this TV, which supposedly, I guess, destroys the way that the Red Queen can see anything. But also, while that's going on, we end up having Kaplan, who ends up coming back into this room with the people and saying, "Oh, hey, yeah, I just crashed all of Red Queen's defenses, so like, I can get you guys out of this door." And so we have the monsters thing coming into this room, and so we have it to where everyone decides, like, well, hey, man, like, I'm going to make my way out of this room. And so that ends up locking the monster in there. We end up having it to where now they're on the train. They're giving Rain the anti-viral thing, but it's not quite taking. It seems that Rain is going to die at some point, and we end up having Alice like holding a gun to Rain's head, and she's like, "Dude, I'm not going to die just yet. Like, give me a couple of minutes, would you?" So we end up having the train go on. Kaplan is like, yeah, we're going to get the heck out of here, until we end up finding out that the monster has decided to make his way onto the train. The monster ends up poking out a window where Kaplan is to just say, hey, I'm going to kill you, Kaplan. And Kaplan is like, oh, okay, great, because I wasn't thinking that I was going to be in the squeakquel anyways. So the monster ends up grabbing Kaplan from a window and ends up killing him. And then eventually the monster ends up making its way into the section where Matt, Alice, and Rain all remain. Because Spencer had been eaten by that monster. He's dead. So we end up having it to where we have a scratch. We have a scratch going through this this part of this train, which ends up scratching Matt, and he's like, "Oh no, I'm probably going to get infected now. This sucks." So we end up having it to where also Rain ends up getting infected as well, and she becomes a zombie as well, and she starts attacking Matt. And so while that's going on, we have Alice, who is now fighting this giant monster. She ends up going and taking this thing's tongue, and she ends up taking a knife and like has it to where the tongue gets stuck onto this train portion thing, and we have it to where Alice is like, dude, like, luckily we have a trap door on this train, so unleash the trap door, coincidentally. And so Matt's like, well, it would be great if I could just unsheath this underground or underneath trap door, but I have Rain in the way. So we have it to where Matt just puts a bullet to Rain's head because he's like, you know what, I was fighting you, but I guess I could use this gun, I guess, to kill you. And so Rain ends up getting shot in the head, which accidentally has her back pedal to coincidentally hit this button and drop this monster to where this monster is now basically like trying to keep up with this train, let's just speak, but eventually he ends up just getting dragged by this train, which ends up killing it. And then we end up having it to where like Matt and Alice are just like high-fiving. They're like, yeah, I think we did it. And so we end up having it to where at the very tail end of this conclusion of this, we end up having Matt and Alice taken by these hazmatish like people, and we end up finding out that Matt is to have started to become infected. And so we end up having like seemingly the hazmat people that are like, oh good, he's getting infected, like we're just gonna go and create some experiments with this guy, test him out, make him so he's gonna be the most infected person that we've ever seen infected. Isn't that great? Thumbs up, high five, everybody. So we have it to where Alice is to wake up later with a bunch of just like every single kind of like wire and tube and whatever that they can just put into this woman, to where they eventually just is like, she wakes up and she's like, ah. It's hilarious. And so we coincidentally have it to where Alice can figure out how to bizarrely be able to unlock this card thing door system by just having a bit of blood onto some needle, and that unlocks this bizarrely. She figured out how to easily just trigger this thing to work. And so we end up having it to where Alice is just strolling around in this facility, and she doesn't get attacked by anybody. She puts on a lab coat, and she's barely wearing next to nothing anyways, and she just decides to just stroll on out of this facility and with a shotgun in hand, and just make one last stand out in the world. And that's how this movie ends. I'm like, so what? Like, dude, wouldn't you have come on and like decided like, you know what, I'm gonna find like a nice pair of boots and some blue jeans and some and like like a ton of different kind of like the thickest coat that you can possibly put on. I'm gonna get myself like a hockey helmet, and like I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna like duct tape my neck to where I definitely will not get anybody nibbling on my neck anytime soon. Like I'm gonna find like a turtleneck and all kinds of things. Like, man, am I gonna just be able to not be able to get infected whatsoever? Because there's still a zombie outbreaking thing going on. But I guess for Alice in her world, I guess she isn't like thinking all that like with all that kind of brain knowledge. But anyways, that's the end of the movie, and I'm just like, God, this movie is so odd and so weird. And it doesn't quite feel Resident Evil enough in any part of this movie. Like, to me, This movie kind of reminds me of the Jason Statham film Ghost of Mars, where I'm like, there's a real disconnect with what's really going on here. Because like we had like some backstory that ends up happening in Ghost of Mars, where I'm like, this makes no sense. Like we have some tribal characters that were trying to kill uh, the military people that end up coming off like yeah, if you look at Ghost of Mars and you look at Resident Evil, it's almost the same movie. It's identical. Like, it makes no sense. It's severely generic, and nothing really makes sense until, like, the movie just ends. And then you're just like, okay, I guess whatever with this movie. So, yeah, Ghost of Mars and this movie are identical. They're the same thing. So if you like this movie, check out Ghost of Mars. But with that said, I'm going to ghost out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.